Hello, everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FMTrain.tv, where every day at this time slot, we are excitedly running a live stream about the Claris FileMaker platform. And so some days we have guest speakers on. Some days you're just stuck with Richard. Some days it's Claris. So this week is Todd Geist week, right? Or Proof Geist week, or Geist Proof, or Proof of Geist, or Geist Proof. I like Geist Proof better. So OttoFMS is a product. There's some. These are also the guys that made the AI products that we saw. We had some of their staff on board, and it demoralized me because their AI was so good that it made me realize what I was missing. So Todd Geist, Todd and I go way back. Todd has always made awesome products. I've always been happy to promote and endorse him. He's stuck with Ernest Co. So Todd is kind of out there and very energetic, and Ernest is like this. It's like your mild-mannered Superman's like Clark Kent. He's a mild-mannered reporter, right? So the two together make for a great company, and they do very, very well. And they're very busy working with Claris, helping them out, which is exciting. So with that in mind, Proof Guys has a product or a service or something called Automatic. And I assume we're still talking about that today. Is that what we're talking about?
So it's a big thing. We actually think of it as a whole ecosystem that's kind of on top of the Claris platform. Kind of like the way the brain keeps adding new layers. We've added a layer on top of FileMaker server and the whole FileMaker hosting experience that is Automatic. And it has parts that run in the cloud, and it's parts that run on your FileMaker server. And it is completely free to get started with. The only time you ever will pay us is if you want us to host your actual FileMaker servers or other services that we sell, like block storage and other types of things you might buy from other cloud providers. But to get into the OttoFMS ecosystem, the Automatic ecosystem, it's free because the main chunks of it run on your server, and they're available to download for free. And we'll get into that.
Todd says he'll take questions in flight. I'm going to make sure, me and Margaret are going to make sure the questions are loosely on topic. Okay, everyone, we're good?
We're good. Can you guys see my screen? Everything good there?
You are beautiful.
Okay, great. There's a link on this page, which I posted in the Zoom chat. If you can distribute that to folks, this is actually a link to, I like to use Excalidraw for presentations. It's a real simple drawing app, and I can freeform stuff and scroll around. It's one of these, it gets super big and super small. And that link on the screen there is a read-only link. You can grab it, and there's lots of, as the week goes along, we'll have more and more materials there. And as I add things to this note, that'll be automatically updated. So you can keep it going. All right. So here we go. So this is OttoFMS and the Automatic ecosystem. I like to call it OttoFMS because that's usually where people get started, and that's sometimes what they hear about first before they hear about the rest of it. So OttoFMS is kind of that's the hook that gets people in. So through the week, we're going to cover that, maybe a couple of other things, saving some hopefully interesting and fun stuff for Friday. Or the alternate title for this is Each Part Contains the Universe. And I like sayings like that. Reminds me of the fact that the world is all interconnected, like this community that we have here, but also like this platform. And, each part of it really is kind of what you can do with all of it. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. Is it takes a community, it takes a platform, it takes all of us to make something that is pretty interesting and unique. So that's where we're at. That's what we're starting with.
Cool.
All right. Day one, we're going to do intro to OttoFMS. So, I got a picture down here I want to drag out here first to kind of give you a sense of what it is we're talking about here. So OttoFMS, its primary, or the big feature that kind of gets everybody, is its automated deployments. And so in that case, we're usually talking about two FileMaker servers, maybe a dev server, maybe a production server, with FileMaker server running on them. You can see that with the little FileMaker icons. And then it's got OttoFMS running on that server, and you're going to have it on both servers. And then there's a FileMaker file called OttoDeploy, which we'll get into. And then you've got your solution, right? So in this case, I've got and the sample files that we'll be using for this week is a 3-file solution. But it could be a single file. It could be 20 files. Doesn't matter. It's whatever the number of files you have that make up your application is your solution. And so that is in the typical most common case, you've got a copy running on development, or maybe you want to switch to have a copy running on development so you're not developing on live servers. And then you have a copy on production. And when you make a bunch of changes, you want to push it to production, and OttoFMS and OttoDeploy manage that for you. And so I think it's important to understand that we're talking about something that's running over the internet, right? There's a communication process that goes on between these servers and your desktop, probably, because you're going to be controlling the deployments from there. And the reason I point this out is you're going to need to have internet connectability between your servers and between your servers and your desktop. For those of you that are all on a single LAN, you're not going out across clouds or anything like that. That's probably pretty easy. But if you have VPNs between your server and between your two servers, or you have networks that can't connect, or you don't have a fully qualified domain on your server, you're going to have issues. So you're going to need to have internet connectability between the various pieces of this setup here. Good so far? Any questions?
Yep. No way. I want to welcome Dan Shockey and all the other people come sliding in sideways to this. Welcome.
All right. So the first thing we got to do is install on a server. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring over, this is a FileMaker server running here in my office. This little window here. And I've got it actually also showing over here, so we can, and you might catch me looking away. But this is from the docs. So we have docs, OttoFMS.com is the
another link.
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was yelling at Margaret that every time you have links like this, we're starting a pile of links, and also
well, let me help you out there with some of this, because right here on this read-only thing, I've got a whole section.
Oh, he's already done it. Okay, cool.
I've already done it. So it's there on that doc. Yes. You want to snip them out. They're all here. We're going to take a look at the product page in a second, but I want to call it the docs first, because once you're in, this is where you're going to live primarily, is in the docs, and also our automatic, our community where people can ask questions and stuff like that. So where was I? We're talking about, what was I doing? I was back on
docs.
Yes. And I was on my screen share here. So here we are. From the docs, you get started right up here at the top. It'll walk you through the process. It'll tell you all the things you need before you can get going. And one of them is your free OttoFMS license key. And so I've already got one down here, but let me just quickly throw that out. The only reason we have a free key really is, instead of just giving it to you, is we do want you to basically agree to our terms, which is stuff like you can't sell this as your own product kind of thing. So we do make you go through a checkout, and you can find that on the main product page, where we kind of, this is the marketing landing page, if you will. And down here on here, you can get a license for it by just clicking this button, and it'll take you through a checkout. You'll agree to the terms, and you will get a license. You'll also get links to an installer, which you can use. And you only need one license, by the way. A lot of people go back and they get a new license for every every OttoFMS server that they set up, but you really only need one. We just want you to have agreed to the terms once, and you can use that license for as many OttoFMS servers as your heart desires. So we make you go through that process just so that we can, track your servers, and if we need to revoke them, we can actually do that, or send you a nasty letter or whatever, that kind of thing. But once you got your license key, you are good to go. So you do want to make sure your machine meets the minimum requirements. This is kind of important. A lot of people try to get away with, especially if they have fairly small servers, or fairly small production servers. Sometimes they try to run these on AWS, like these tiny little burstables that you can barely run FileMaker with. You can't really run Otto on those. You really need to run it. We tell you should have an 8 GB of RAM server is the bare minimum. And the part of the reason is that Otto is going to do a bunch of things, and like migrate your files, and that uses a lot of memory migrate your files. It just takes up a lot of juice to do that. So you're going to need to meet the minimum requirements. And if you don't, it's just not going to work well. So go through this, do all that kind of stuff. And then you can, we're going to use this handy dandy install script here. You need to pick your Linux, Windows, or Mac OS. And we just did in this last release, we now have an Apple Silicon ARM release for OttoFMS. Before we were running in Rosetta, but now this is actually native Apple Silicon.
Okay.
So you can run this command, which is what we're going to do. You can also just download the Mac installer, and it's just an installer like every other app you've installed a million times, and you're welcome to do that. But once you get used to this method, I think this is probably what you're going to want to do. So you're going to copy this command to your clipboard, and you're going to bring up the terminal, and you're just going to paste it, and you're going to hit enter. And then you're going to enter your computer password, the same one you use to authenticate every app that you install. And that's it. It's going to be done here in a few seconds. And by the way, when you want to upgrade to the latest version, that's all you have to do. It's the same thing. And it will automatically uninstall and reinstall OttoFMS on your server. So we make that upgrading and installing process very, very, very simple. So that is installing it, and it is now should be running on my computer. And if I open up a new page and pull this up, this is M4. There it is. It's asking for my license key, which I've got over here somewhere waiting for this very purpose. Here we go. Going to plug that in.
And then I have a question when you get past this point. Oh, there we go.
So the license is activated. And then you just enter in your username and password. So I'm going to log in. You'll notice this takes a few seconds here. I'm not exactly sure what the deal is. I think it's different versions of FileMaker Server will run the FMS admin command with a delay. And I'm not sure why. We're really trying to track it down, but we haven't been able to. So you might see a short delay there as you log in with the Mac. But once you do, this is where you land. You land on this here page. And so this is a brand new server. It's got nothing much happening on it yet. And it does have some databases. But we haven't connected. There's no clients connected. We haven't run any webhooks. Does have some stats here for you. And we're going to dive a little deeper into this dashboard here in just a second.
Can I ask a question?
Process. So let me stop there and
yeah. So what did you install? So we're on a Mac server that already has FileMaker Server 21 dot whatever on it.
That's right. Yeah.
And you installed a service. Is that what you installed?
Yes, it is a service. So it's installed on your server. It connects up with your FileMaker server, and it extends it. It adds a bunch of APIs and a bunch of other stuff that let us do all the things that you can do with OttoFMS. An important thing to note, and we'll get more into this later this week, is everything we do with OttoFMS that we have a UI for in OttoDeploy and in the web console, there is an API for as well. So I'll point that out if you want to look at the OttoFMS API. Here it is, and it is just like the one you see for the admin API and the data API for FileMaker, because we are using the same exact standard, the OpenAI spec to define and declare APIs for the server. And so if you're used to using other tools that make HTTP requests, you can just use, everything we're going to see today, you can write your own tools to do it and just make HTTP requests. In fact, there are a few people that have built their own dashboards completely in a FileMaker file, and they just use the API to do that because they want it integrated, especially have a couple people with vertical market solutions that have done that. They already have a dashboard built in FileMaker to deploy their solutions to all their customers. And so they just build in all this stuff into their own thing. I think it's important because this is a part of what I say about every bit is the universe. Is we start with base layer functionality that is standards based. So open API specs, API first at the bottom layer. And that lets you plug in at whatever level you want. You can use tools, you can use JavaScript, you can use HTTP, you can use Python, you can use web apps, or you can use FileMaker, or you can just use the UIs that we built for you to do it all. It's up to you. Pick your level. Pick your adventure. Choose your adventure. That's the phrase.
Choose your own adventure. I remember that book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that is that. So all right, let's see. Where do I want to go next? So let me look at my notes here. So we just installed this bit, right?
hmm
And so the next thing in my notes here, we're gonna do, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna close that server, and I'm gonna pop open um, a different server that I've already installed. I've already set up a little bit, and this one is running on the automatic cloud. You can see up here with the URL.
hmm
That doesn't really matter. It can be running on as long as you can make a connection to it, it can be running anywhere. So let's just go through this UI real quick. Deployments and builds we're going to get into in a minute. File browser is kind of interesting. So this is basically a UI to all of the folders that you might want access to on your FileMaker server. So that would be things like your backups, your documents directory, where you can import and export stuff, right, from your FileMaker scripts. Your live databases folder. We've also got offsite storage. We've got the OttoFMS folders we'll get into what some of these things are. But even like if you just wanted to upload a web page to the HTTP folder, you can do that here. You can drill in, you can go to the HTTPS root, and you can just, you can upload a file to that folder. So that's the file browser. It gives you access to pretty much everything that you need on your FileMaker server without having to log in with remote desktop. It's a nice little thing, because part of, on the automatic platform, we don't actually give people root access to the server. So they have access to everything they need through this console here, right? We've got webhooks, and API keys we'll get into a little bit later in the week, but I want to call out the FileMaker server thing here. And so there's no databases on this file in this server yet, so we don't see any here, and there's no clients connected. Obviously, this is a demo server, but this is kind of what you'd expect from the admin console. You see your clients, and your connected clients, and your database is open, and we'll come back and look at that in a second. Another one that's super helpful is this services tab. And so you may have noticed sometimes that your FileMaker server processes might hang, and you might have to go in remote desktop and like quit them or force quit them and whatever. So this is quick little buttons to just restart things like the web publishing engine. And you just can restart it, and away it goes. Admin server. Sometimes the admin server can hang. You can just restart it here. The other thing we have, and we're really proud of, is I think we have a really great log viewer.
Oh, thank God. Someone made a log that doesn't suck.
Yeah, so this one's pretty great.
Yeah.
And, we've got, here's like the auto info log. So this is, you can see auto starting up, and it tells you what version it is. And, if there was an errors would show up here, but you can also look at errors. You can look at any of the FileMaker logs, any of them at all. You can look at top call stats.
Yes.
You can look at all this stuff, everything that's in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
you can filter on it. You can filter on things, and it highlights it, or you can hit enter and filter down for those particular things, right? So yay. And yeah, so pretty cool. You can also access log.
I'm already excited. I'm on the log page here. Sorry. If you hear me clapping,
it's pretty useful. If we have some time, we have a way to be able to, from your FileMaker apps, to add, there's a log actually that we make available to your FileMaker app. So if you want to do some debugging on the server, it's hard to do if you're running PSOS. So you can write your own logs from a FileMaker application, like this just happened, or that happened, or this was an error, or whatever. And you get a log here for that. And it's called the app log. And we don't have here. So there's nothing in here yet, because there's been no apps that run it, but you get that too. I'll call out settings real quick. We do have some fun things you can do, like you can change the theme color that you want to use.
Oh, can you swap it to orange?
You can pop it to orange. Yeah, you want orange? You like orange?
Yes.
This one or that one?
Margaret has a
good.
thing about oranges.
Orange and black is a really nice setup. I like this one. Some of the colors work better in dark mode, which we have full dark mode support, as you can see. So you got.
I wasn't going to ask you about the colors, but it's good because you could colorize certain, like your dev servers versus your live servers.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's right. And so if you can very easily tell, you get used to, if you set your dev server to be orange, for example, you always know where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we actually have some stuff that within your FileMaker app can actually know what server you're on. And that's part of this right here, where we can actually, if you log into the admin console, you can name your server. And that's actually the only thing that you can get with get hostname, right? The FileMaker function get hostname. We'll take a look at this if we have a chance later. But so this actually sticks that get hostname to whatever you put here. So that means that your FileMaker code can now know what host it's on. You can say I'm on dev or I'm on production based on that. Just a couple of fun things. What else we got here? There's a bunch of settings. There's a lot to here. We probably can't get into all this stuff right now, but this is where you go if you want. Well, this is a fun one. If you've got IP filtering on for your FileMaker server, you can set up the same filtering for OttoFMS. So you can't only allow certain IP addresses to come in, kind of stuff. Offsite backups we'll get to in a later date. And yeah, so
we have some questions.
okay, sure.
I guess you need to install things in 3 different computers: dev server, production server, and then also the desktop FM Pro.
You don't have to install it on the desktop FM Pro. We'll get to that next.
Oh, okay. Nice.
But there is a component that installs on each server, and that's the thing that does all the magic talky talk back and forth, and also gives you this web page here.
Also, I was reading chat, so I don't know if this got answered already, but I'll ask it again. Can you have one dev server with multiple production servers?
You can have as many servers as you want. We have some people who have dozens of servers, and they run with this. Yeah.
Excellent. Another question that just slid in since I've got you here. Regarding the log file review, does it include logs with old at the end? Or can you select to see those?
Anything that goes in the anything that is in any of the log folders shows up here by default. So if it's in the log folders in FileMaker server, then it will show up here.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Does that make sense, Lynn? If that doesn't, please let me know so I can let Todd know. I think that's the current collection of questions. So
yeah, and you can also do things like I didn't point out, but this is actually super useful. Especially if you're like doing some nasty debugging or you're trying to figure out what's going on with your server, just clear your log, if you don't need it anymore, and then you'll get a fresh log and you don't have so much to search through and get lost in. You can also download it, which is nice. So,
okay, there you go. That is actually really nice. Sift through and search through it and everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can just clear it and start over and
nice.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's very nice.
I did miss, I think there's a couple things here. Somewhere there is a restart. Yeah. So if you need to restart OttoFMS or you want to uninstall and get rid of the license that's installed on there, you can do that here as well. Those are important things.
Okay.
Yep. All right.
Cool. I think we're good. I think we're good to keep trucking then. I don't see any other questions, commentary. Let me know, people.
Okay. So let's go back to this for a second. So we've now basically where we are is we've got this guy and we've got this guy. We don't yet have this guy in there. So we're gonna put him on. And this is a FileMaker file, and it can run anywhere. It can even run on your desktop, just as in a folder somewhere if you want. It doesn't need to be on the server at all, but most people install it on one of their servers. And typically it's their dev server, but again, it doesn't really matter where it is as long as you have it somewhere. And we make it pretty easy to install. So let's go to our dev server. And if we go to deployments, we say send deployments easily with OttoDeploy. Deploy now. So we're just going to click that. And this will add the latest version of OttoDeploy onto the server and open the file for use. You will be able to monitor progress on the deployments page. You can put it in a different folder if you want. I'm just going to leave it in the default folder. Going to click deploy. And what this is going to do is it's going to reach out and download the latest version of OttoDeploy and install it on your server. And when it's done, you'll get username and password, the default encryption key, and then you can launch it. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll launch the main file. And there we go. Pull it down here a little bit. It'll tell you haven't changed your credentials. We're not going to bother in this demo. You get the idea. Um, a couple things to note about this. This is a FileMaker file. However, the entire thing is a web viewer app. So all of the code for the UI is in a web viewer. So this is what we call a hybrid app. And this is really freaking cool. In fact, we're doing this more and more where we are building UIs in FileMaker entirely in web code, especially because the AIs are so good at it now that you can make a beautiful app. So this is a FileMaker file, but if you notice, it's doing things that are very un-FileMaker-y, right? In terms of like this nice sliding and all of these, this animation that's back and this kind of stuff that's happening. And that's because, again, it is a web app, right? So we get all the fun things we can do with web apps that we can build, but it's still using FileMaker for the database and for security. So it's your FileMaker file. You can change the passwords and the security on it as much as you want, and it won't impact our ability to keep this file updated for you. So when this file, if the web app changes, if the GUI changes, it's really you'll get a button here that says update to a new version. You press the button and like in a second, you get the new updated user interface, just updates for you. And on the rare occasion when we actually have to change the database schema itself, since we have a automatic deploy server running here, we can deploy this file in place. So again, we can maintain the code for you beautifully, and you can maintain security over it, and it's unlocked. So you can look at the file, you can do whatever you want. We don't actually care. You can go in and look at scripts. You can do whatever you want in here, but we can still update it and maintain the code for you and give you new changes whenever you need it. So that is, I think, pretty cool. So, okay, so OttoDeploy is now installed. So that takes care of getting this guy here, Dunzos. The next thing we want to do is we're on this is our dev server here. And as we saw before, there's only OttoDeploy is on here now. We don't have any of our dev files on here yet because our dev files are still over on production. And so if you look at our production server, which is a nice green color so we can tell the difference between them, we have our FileMaker system, which is called Highlander. And that is these are the 3 files that we're going to be using as our demo files. We'll dive into them a little bit, but what's inside the files doesn't really matter. That's the stuff that you guys bring to the table is your FileMaker magic, right? Whatever you do, that's yours. But we have, these are actually real files, and these are actually used. It's an actual solution. So these aren't like fake demo-y things. This is a real system, and it has 3 files in it. A couple of things while I'm here to point out before we move on real quick is that you can do things like close and delete and download these files from this interface. You can do things like rename, move. You can get a save as XML, which is really useful if you're using some of the analysis tools or FM comparison. You can download a copy, a clone. You can encrypt and decrypt the files right from here too.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So maybe you mentioned this. I had to run up real quick. I got a quick call, but is the intent with this interface to supplant or replace the FileMaker server web administration page? I mean, it seems like it does everything plus more, right?
It doesn't do everything. And so it depends. Like now that AI is making this coding a lot easier, we may actually end up rebuilding the entire thing. But Claris is also shipping a lot of stuff on the admin console. You may have noticed the last few versions. Yeah. I really don't want to get in sort of a chase them kind of situation. So our current stance is we don't actually try to replace it. We try to extend it. Okay. But we do handle the basic things that you might just want as you're running around your system real fast, Okay. And we add some things like moving files, which you can't do right on the admin console.
I have a dumb question. Can you set the database cache on the server cache with your tool?
No, we don't have that. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the one thing that we still have to go to the command line to do. I always have
and so we do have some of those things in settings that we probably should just like everything that's in the admin console, admin API that's not in the console, we should add. We just we haven't gotten around to.
Well, that's my little pet peeve, because people never change that. Then they wonder why their FileMaker server is so slow. You know, and then,
So a couple other quick things just to point out. And again, fun stuff that we're able to do in Webland, right? So this is a web interface, but even in our FileMaker file, oh, well, we don't have any deployments yet, so we can't, I'll make this point later. But notice this fun table that we can do, right? Where we can,
wow.
right? We can actually do this in FileMaker too, which is pretty cool, right? We can have this, we can even go full screen on this table, which is kind of nifty, right?
Wow.
Filtering, all the fun stuff you'd want to do with a table.
Okay.
We could do this within FileMaker and databases as well. And I don't know if we'll get a chance to dive deep into that, but just know that basically anything you can build on the web, you can build in FileMaker. You do have to learn some webby stuff, but that stuff's getting easier and easier with the AI tools. Put that aside for the moment. These are our production files. So the first step typically people want to do is, hey, I'm interested and I want to start doing development on a dev server. And so what do I do? So the first thing is we're going to pull up our OttoDeploy, and we're going to pull our files from the production server to the dev server so we can get started.
Okay.
Cool.
So
what we're going to do is we're going to make a deployment. So anytime we are moving files from place to place, we call that a deployment. The deployment may be an installation. The files aren't there yet. It may be a replacing. The files are being replaced, or it may be a migration. The files are being migrated or updated. Those are all deployments. We call those deployments. So let's go ahead and make a deployment. So I'm going to call this initial install. Initial install. And so we're going to do, so the first thing we got to do is pick a source and a destination. So now it is asking about these guys, right? Production and dev. Where are the files? What is the source of the files? The source of the files is the production server right now. So let me flip back over there. And I'm going to add a new server. And I'm going to kind of just move this a little bit so I can go back and forth between these things, because I want to just copy and paste rather than try to type, because that'll save us all time. So we'll grab the URL.
So the teal color is the live color, and
yes, that is production.
Orange is our dev server. Is that what we're doing?
Dev is, I changed it back from dev. It is this.
Oh, okay.
Orange is a bit tough on my eyeballs, but you're free to do whatever you like.
Yeah, Margaret.
So we're entering in the production server. And so this is the URL to the server that has FileMaker on it. And again, really important to point out, this file is on my desktop. I better be able to reach this server, right? It's got to be, so if I've got a client who doesn't have a fully qualified domain, we'll save that for how you deal with that for a later day. We got lots of days to cover. But for now, that's got to be available to you. And we can put in here that this is our production server, right? And then I'm going to test it. And it's going to say, great, FileMaker, we've got the right version of FileMaker server. We've got the right version of OttoFMS. And what it wants right now is an admin API key. And so if we remember, we're looking at this, in this case, we're looking at production. We've got these API keys. And what these API keys is they're a way to store credentials, as you've seen API keys by now, probably just a long string that you can use in place of the credentials, because you don't actually want to give the server credentials out, right? You want to, you need the root. This is the root credentials to your server. You'd much rather have something where you can come along later and go, delete, and then no access. So nobody ever gets to use the credentials, the actual credentials. So I can come in here and I can create a new credential, or I can do that right in line in my FileMaker, and I can paste it. I can also I can go get a key and paste it here, or I can just do it here and say OttoDeploy is my label. And I need what am I on? This is TG prod. That's this guy here. Let's see if there it goes. And I'm just going to create that key, and it's going to store that key, and we're going to test it. Boom. So we've got our source file. Now we're going to do the same thing for our dev server. I'm just going to grab, and quickly, just to note, we've got this new I spelled it wrong, but there's that new admin API key that was created, right? So now this OttoDeploy file has access to the features on Otto because it's got that key.
Okay.
Let's do the same thing for our dev here. We'll go grab our key. We'll grab our URL. We'll paste it. Add a new server. I'm going to paste it. We're going to say dev, and we'll test it. Beautiful. And I'll go and say create a new one. And this I'll put in OttoDeploy, and we'll spell it right this time. And then I'll pull up tg dev. Oop. I want to do the whole thing here. And allow once. Boom. So I'm just using 1Password to fill out these. It all works with 1Password just fine. So we keep all our credentials in 1Password. And there we go. So now we have a production server and a development server, and you can see they show up over here. So here's our prod, and they're right here as well. And you can add as many servers as you want, right? And then you can create as many deployments as you want. Groovy?
Okay.
Good so far? All right, so let's go back.
So we have the local FileMaker app, and then we had to go into your OttoDeploy on each server.
So OttoDeploy is only running on OttoDeploy is just hosted here.
Okay.
But that's for convenience. This OttoDeploy can live anywhere. It can be in a folder on your hard drive.
So let me draw here real quick. So we're here. We need the key for this, right? That's what we need the key for.
The key. We need keys from that to go into. We need to link these two guys together with that key.
Okay, but what the key is to what software? Your software specifically?
It is to our software. That's right.
Which is this right here. Is that what that is?
Yes, exactly right.
And this is just Otto. What we call this Otto. We're also working
OttoFMS.
Okay, this is OttoFMS. Okay, great.
Yep. And Margaret, so we just linked those two together.
Yep.
With that key.
Okay, right? Got it.
And so the nice thing is, OttoDeploy doesn't know your server credentials. Right? It only has a key, and you can always revoke that key.
Yep.
Here.
Okay.
Come in and delete it, and now OttoDeploy can't touch it, right?
Okay.
So that's important because, and also again, we don't want that key. Like if we're running your whole hosting, if we're your hosting provider, then we have all that stuff. But if you're running on-prem, again, we don't have this database. We don't have. You can secure it with your own credentials, your own admin, your own encryption key. We never see that stuff.
Perfect.
You guys keep it, right? Got it?
Yeah. No.
So
what happens is
what
happens? You say something, then my brain starts cartwheeling, thinking about what you said, and I miss the next 3 or 4 sentences, which screws. A lot of people do that. So yeah. All right. Cool.
All right. So we got the two things out. So again, going back to this picture, so we have verified that this link works, right? That the link from dev to your OttoDeploy works, and from prod to your OttoDeploy.
Correct.
We have not verified that this works because these guys you could be on different networks. We have people running, they've got some stuff on AWS. They got some stuff over here. They've got VPNs they might have VPNs between here and here, but not between here and here, right? So that's a common issue people have there. Like, I don't know why this won't work. And it's because everybody's got to be able to see each other. That's key.
Okay.
So to make that easy to test, we give you this. And you can just pop this open. You say test, and it is going to tell you, yay, we can connect. If it can't connect one way versus the other, depending on which connections are available, we have some workarounds, and we'll actually tell you how to change your deployment so that it'll work. If we can make it work, we will automatically tell you this is the way you need to set it up to work, and then you just follow those instructions and it'll work. If you don't have any good connections between that, you have to solve that problem before we can get past this move. Cool?
Cool.
Okay, so what I'm going to do here is let me go ahead and add files. Actually, no, we'll go down. First thing first is start here, so let's do that. So I am going to add the credentials to the FileMaker files now. This is the default. This is now file options, right? So because when you do migrations, you have to have full access for the migrations. You don't need full access for installs or replaces, but if you're going to do a migration, you're going to need to actually have full credentials or a credential that has the FM data migration extended privilege set.
Yep.
Really important. And so that's a nice thing so that you can actually use credentials that don't have access to the file, that can't open the file, that can't open the file on the network. They'll only work for migration. You can set that up. I have in my 1Password a Highland. Let's see. Which one is it? It's this one. Did it actually do that? Wow, it actually did it. My 1Password just went in and did it. That's pretty cool. So let's see. Did that really? Oh, but it closed it, unfortunately. Too bad. So that's 1Password. It just closed it automatically on me. But still, it put the password in, and I can click these little buttons to copy it over. We don't have encryption keys on here, but you'd put those in. These are pretty much the defaults. We can dive into where you might change some of this stuff in later episodes as we get more advanced. I should mention this one. Usually, you actually want the accounts from the production server so that you can change accounts in production and they won't get overwritten with the dev accounts, right? Which is nice.
Yep.
But we'll leave that alone for now. All this stuff is fine. If anybody's from overseas, you can set your different locales, which will impact, how dates are formatted and all that kind of stuff as well. You could change subfolders. We're not going to bother. We're just going to do the thing. I'm going to do that. And then if I try to click right now, you'll be like, oh, I set everything up, but it'll warn you. It'll say, you can't do that because you haven't actually picked what files you want to move from production to dev. So we're going to want to do that. And so we're going to pick the 3 files that we want. So it's now reading from our production server and saying, I want these 3 files. So great. So notice it's doing an install or replace. If the files are already there, it'll just replace them. They're not, as we know. In this case, they're just going to do an installation. Should note, you can actually change names, and Otto will manage that for you, and that will become important as we get to more advanced deployments down the road. Let's just leave it at that. We'll come back for more questions later, but let's go right through. So the next thing we do is we hit review and deploy, and it's basically validated that everything should work at this point. It can't test the file password. So if you don't have your file passwords right and you're doing a migration, it'll still fail there. But now we can just go ahead and either start this now, or we can schedule it for later. We can add a FileMaker server-side schedule to run this deployment later. But in this case, we're just going to start now. And it's going to kick it off. And you'll see it'll run through the logs here. But I also want to jump over to to dev and show deployments. And you can see it's actually doing the deployment here as well. So it's the same kind of thing happening.
So did it close the file and make a copy and it's moving the copy?
It's making a copy of the files. Yeah, it's exactly what it's doing. And it actually did that. So it's doing a build on the production server. In fact, if we go look at that, we can see that build. It just actually finished just now. And over here, it's actually pushing the files from in this case, production back to dev. It uploads them through a push mechanism. It does for the super techies. It does a sort of automatic, resumable, high-speed upload from FileMaker server to server. And then, boom, it's done. Oh, we didn't, I don't know if you couldn't see the confetti. I almost want to do this again. We'll do it again. We'll actually do it again and we'll watch the confetti. But the whole thing ran, and you can see the results here. And we can return to our dashboard.
So it worked, and it says yay, and then it launches confetti across the screen.
Yeah. We'll have to show
I
you.
love that touch. That's wonderful.
Yeah. It's a nice little touch. And then it gives you the log. And then if we look at our FileMaker server now, we've got our files, and they're installed here on production. All right. So now we are at our sort of base case. We are now ready to start doing development on production.
And I know this took a while, but we've spent a lot of time just doing the initial move, right? So you call it a deployment, but really the word deployment means we're moving some from point A to point B. That's right. All the deploy. Okay.
Deployment's a nice way to say moving some. We actually moved the files. In this case, we made copies of these guys, right? We made, oh, come on. Let this work. Be a nice, fun thing. And move them over here. Boom. That's what we just did. We made copies of those and we moved them over here. Boom.
Yep. Okay. That's a great visualization. Okay? Excellent.
So that's what just happened. So now they're on this. I should have started with these guys empty. That would have been a better move. But now you get it. We just moved the files from here to here. And now we are sort of ready. And now we can start doing development on our dev server and then move our stuff over to production when we're ready to do that. Question so far?
I don't need the migration feature. Can I use the local AutoDeploy file without putting anything on the server? I want to use it to manage the server. Okay.
No, the OttoFMS must be on the server. This piece is where all the magic happens. It does not work in any other way. And there's actually a really good reason for that. If you do migrations without using a tool like this, basically what happens is you're basically on dev and you take a copy of these and you bring them down to your computer, and maybe they're clones. So that was pretty fast. But then you have to go over here to your dev files and your production files rather. Oh, I've got backwards. I've got, for some reason, I think dev is on the right. Okay. So first thing I have to do if I don't use a tool like this is I have to move production down to my desktop, right? If this is like 50 gigabytes, you know, you're talking a few hours, could be, to download that. Depends on your network, right? And then you got to make a copy of these guys, your clones, and you bring them down. You bring them down to your desktop. And then you do all the command line stuff to make all that migration happen, right? And then you have to take those files that are now migrated and you have to move them back up to your production server, which is then going to take the same amount of data and move it twice, right? So you've now taken, if you do it that way, you've taken all of the data that's in your production server and you moved it twice. That is going to be the bottleneck. That is going to take time. If you do it this way, by doing everything on the server, it doesn't take very much time. You're going to see how fast we can do a data migration.
Okay, so a couple quick questions. We're just going to hit these real quick. I'm going to hit this for easy one real quick. Does it do external containers, yes or no?
You can do external containers. Most of the time, when you're doing dev to production, you don't care because your production containers, again, it's just what I said, your production data doesn't leave the server. That's the beautiful thing about this. We're not moving it. But if you do want to copy the external data, if you just want to do an install, you can actually do that.
Okay, so the next question is, well, Scott Kane, we're going to get into that probably tomorrow a little bit. Scott Kane's starting to ask about schema and data. We're not really to the point where we're migrating stuff.
We're about, actually, I'm going to run a migration in a minute, which actually I can talk about what happens. But I want to get that far today, and then we can really get into the questions.
Next Tech did ask a question. When you did the data movement from the over here, we moved it back over here. Were the users that were connected here, were they paused or were they kicked off?
So in this case, they weren't there, since there were no files on the dev server. There was nobody to kick out. On the production server, we didn't kick anybody out. We made copies of the files.
Okay. I think when we get to do the migration, though, like if we actually update this and we do a migrate, anyone who's logged in over here is going to get kicked.
That's right. They are.
So
they would have to be.
They have to.
You wouldn't want to be migrating data when somebody was logged into the file. That would be a very bad thing.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right.
All right. So now I want to talk about migration because and I want to use this handy dandy thing here. So what we're going to do now is, instead of making a copy, we're going to make a clone. We're going to make clones, and we're going to automatically ship those clones over here onto the server, right? They're going to all be named differently, and we're going to do that migration here.
Yep.
And then we're going to open up we're going to close these files, get the clones over, and then we're going to do the migration, and then we're going to open it again.
Yep. Perfect.
And so that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to do that right now. And what I'm going to, because we're a little tight on time, what I'm going to do is just set up a new deployment. And this one we'll call migration. And in this case, we're going to choose our source to be dev and our destination server to be production. I'm going to grab the 3 files and I'm going to set my default options. And let me bring up the password for this is, and I'm going to leave the rest of this stuff, right? So this is the simplest migration we can do. So imagine you've just been doing dev. You made a bunch of changes to all this stuff, and you want to push this over here. You've already got your migration set up. Let's say it's Friday end of day, and you're just gonna push your new changes over, and maybe you'll do a little testing over the weekend before people show up on Monday or whatever you want to do. But the main thing is, notice what's happened here. We've now changed it. Before we saw install replace, but OttoDeploy has figured out that the files are already there. And so now it's telling you schema is going this way. Schema is going from the source to the destination.
Okay.
Groovy?
Yeah, actually it makes sense.
So an important thing to know about the way migrations work is we're taking a clone, we're moving it over, and we're shoving the data in. There is no possible way for some schema changes to be moved and others not to be moved. We're not patching the file. We're taking a clone of the dev file, the entire clone, with all the changes you put into it, moving it over, and shoving the data into it. All right? Because sometimes people think, well, some of my changes didn't go over. Not possible, actually. Usually it's they just forgot, they did something wrong. But it's an important thing to understand. It's the clone that's going over, and the data is getting shoved into it by the migration utility that's on every server now. We good?
Yep.
All right. So I do want to, I'm not going to go into the changes. You just assume we made a bunch of changes. It doesn't matter. We'll get into some of the nuances of when that sort of does matter, the kinds of changes and what it might do to the time of the migration. But in this case, let's just assume you made a few changes, not a whole lot, but you've made some layout script changes, maybe a few fields, whatever. We're going to review and deploy. I can, again, schedule this for midnight if I wanted to.
Oh, go back. What button did you push? You did that really fast.
I started it. Sorry. There's a button up here that says review and deploy.
Oh, review and deploy. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and then you get here. So it's actually going. So let's actually look over on production. We'll look at deployments, and it's actually doing our migration now. And you can see it's sending the just-in-time build over to the source server, which is our dev server, and you can see the build is happening here. It actually already finished. So clones are very fast. So boom. So it is now doing the data migration right now. You can see that because this is the data migration log. Right? It's actually doing it. The data migration is already happening.
Yeah, we haven't done, well, probably about a year ago, we did the migration conversation again by hand, the way you do it by hand with the command line. And so hopefully most people understand what that's about. Some people won't. If I need to come back next week or whatever and talk about it a little bit, we can. But so I have a question here, though. Can you go back to the diagram real quick?
Sure.
Just go back to this. So I'm going to bring up my handy dandy. So we told this thing to go, and so this is our dev server, and it looks like we're checking the log between here and the log that's over here. So we're looking at the pink log versus the teal log. Is that what?
Well, we're looking at, because there's stuff happening on both servers.
On both servers, right? So it's not a consolidated log. It's two separate.
But we do make a consolidated log for you in case of debugging, and we can look at that.
Okay.
But it has to happen because we make copies of the dev files.
Here's the clone over here. Then it shoots it across.
Yep.
Then we have to close this file.
Yep.
And then we start doing the migration into the, and then we bring it back online, right?
That's right.
And then everyone is happy. Yes, got it. Okay, great.
Yep.
Sorry. I feel like John Madden, for those of you who know about John Madden football.
So it's done. It's complete. Okay. So that took 1 minute and 24 seconds. These are not huge files, but they're not like tiny. The main file is 1.4 gigabytes. So it just did a complete deployment from server A to server B, from your dev server to your production server, of 1.4 gigabytes of data was handled within that process in 1 minute and 24 seconds. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
So we have people that do 80 gigabytes, and they can still do that. It depends. We'll get into optimizing depending on your network and where your servers are, how to optimize for really, really large deployments. But typically for most people with your usual FileMaker system, they're talking about sub 5 minute migrations.
Yeah, then Todd's going to talk about this. I mean, maybe we got 4 days left, but the idea is that if you add a field or remove a field, and then you re-add the field back with the same name, there's all sorts of little rules that go into migration, which will slow it down. But even at its almost slowest speed, this would take, I would say, less than an hour for this to run.
There are very few migrations that we've seen that are an hour long.
Okay.
There's some, but we're typically talking about very large amounts of data, and they've done a change. Sometimes, depending on the change, as Richard was hinting at, you can kick the migration. If we look at the log, we can actually see some hints on this. So you can see in the detailed log, it'll say block mode migration. That block mode is super fast. If you ever see record mode means it's actually doing record by record. And so if you have a super giant table and it's very large in terms of number of fields and also just how many records it is, and you've made a bunch of changes to that table that require it to go into record mode, then you're going to see your longer migrations.
Yeah.
But if you're going in block mode, you're just not going to see migrations that are hours long. You're going to see minutes long that you're going to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Questions, Margaret?
Is there any chance of a data loss when the data is moved into the clone?
Not unless there's file corruption.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
And what will happen? Yeah. What'll happen is we do see this actually because I should just to give you an idea, we're migrating 12,000 FileMaker files a month now across our ecosystem. So we see pretty much everything. We see systems that were started in FileMaker 3, and people are doing migrations with them. And so we see all kinds of stuff: file corruption, weird map monster files with giant spaghetti graphs. We see all kinds of stuff. So we do see files that are really corrupt, and they'll get into migration, and the migration tool will go, sorry, pal. It'll seg fault, or it'll just crash, and it won't continue. And if that happens, this is good. What this brings up is there are cases where the migration cannot proceed. Let's say, for example, that you're running on you're doing this in production. You've got 100 users in there, and some of them just refuse to disconnect, or they get stuck open, which can happen. FileMaker server, you've probably seen this. A FileMaker client will not let go, and Otto can't close the file. So it goes, hey man, we couldn't close, so we can't proceed. We're done. There's also things when we get into the more advanced stuff where we do like sub deployments, or there's a way that you can run a test. You can run this an OttoDeploy. You can run a post deployment script, and that post deployment script in your file can do some tests. Like maybe you run a bunch of tests, and if they don't pass, you can actually signal back to OttoFMS abort. And in all of those cases, when OttoFMS is not certain that it was able to do the migrations correctly, or it's been aborted because of some rule that you've set, it will simply not deploy those files into the live databases folder, and it won't open them. It'll leave the originals untouched, because part of what I didn't note here that's really important on this diagram is that part of what happens is the last thing we do after we do that data migration, and after it completes successfully and we get no errors in the log and we get no errors in the post-deployment script, the very last thing we do is we make backups of the production files, we move them into a special folder, and then we push those files into, basically put them where they were, put them back where they were, and then open them. So we do not replace the production files until we're as certain as we can possibly be that everything went successfully. But if you screwed up, really importantly, let's say, oh, you know what? That feature is not done. It's got a bug. Rats. No
Yeah.
problem. We
What's
get you
our
covered.
rollback? We have a rollback.
We do have a rollback. If you go into any deployment, you can undo it.
Okay.
Now, I should note that it depends on whether or not you've deleted the backups, because if you have your FileMaker server, if you set it up to hold every backup that's ever been made, you're going to run out of disk space. So one of the settings that we have here is in the config is how many deployment backups do you want to keep? Because you're probably not going to want to keep 100. That would be dumb. We have the default set at 3. You can set it to whatever you want. So if your deployment is within the last 3 in this case, you will be able to undo it. And it'll basically just move the files back. All right.
Okay, so Shiegel, there's one of our James Shiegel has a couple questions. Does this, and he says it, but I'm gonna say, does this notify the users that are on or just kick them off? And can you schedule the notifications? So
it does the same notifications that you would do under the case of closing the files, right? They get the same thing, and it does that by default. However, you can do you do have a bunch of notification options, or a bunch of ways you can do notifications. Let's see here. I'll have to cover that maybe in another, it's a little bit, there's some more complicated things. Just to note that there's if some of you want to play around with this over the next 24 hours, there's a whole advanced options thing where you can get to doing a bunch of other stuff like setting up notifications and other fun things that you can do. And so you can do some of that stuff, or you can just notify everybody, half an hour before. You can go in and say, in half an hour, send a message. In a half an hour, you could use this. You go into FileMaker server, you pick your clients, you choose them, you click send a message, say send. In half an hour, I'm going to run a deployment. Everybody get out. You can do that too.
I have a quick question. You said something a little bit ago, and I think you were. I'm not going to pick on you, but you chose your words with lacking precision. You said that every month or whatever it is, you guys, or every day, you move 12,000. This product
every month.
You move 12,000 files.
That's right, 12,000 FileMaker files.
And you can see. And you said, well, we can see, if it's corrupted or this or that. What can you actually see? Because someone, I guarantee, was wondering.
No. So this is a good point.
Security-wise, yeah.
So we do not collect. We do collect usage statistics. So what we mean by that is we collect the number of migrations, the number of files, the number of webhooks you received, the total amount of data that we've backed up, which is now terabytes and terabytes of data. So we collect those things, and that's really useful for us because it lets us know what people are actually using. We do not collect your logs or your credentials or any of that stuff. We don't collect any of it.
Okay.
So it's only usage stats. Just basically, we can tell based on the license, so we can know how many deployments you're doing if we know your email address, for example. We can tell that. But that's it. We can't, or know how many databases you've migrated. We can tell that. But we don't collect anything has to do with your particular systems at all.
Which is good to know. We have a quick question from Dan Shockley. I assume that an undo of a deployment brings back the original production files, and
That's
that
right.
any post-deployment data changes in the hopefully short amount of time hosted migrated files will be ignored. In other words, you'd want to do that undo before users started putting real data on the newly migrated files.
And then the other thing is you're going to want to download if there's been data entered. What you're going to want to do is go into the file browser real quick, or you can do it here actually. And you would take this and you'd say download a copy. You can download a copy of all the files, because when you undo, you will be destroying the files that have been moved over. But it warns you, it tells you that. So, you're going to want to download that in case any data was entered. And then you're going to we can't magically figure out what data got entered. So you're going to have to, that's your standard, you know, you're going to have to go in and look at the data and figure out what data has to get transferred back or something like that. So ideally you want to do it before anybody gets in there.
Someone wanted to know where the undo button was. They're like, I missed it. Can you show me where to click?
So there's a couple of things that are useful here. I'll cover real quick. So, we've got, you always look for these 3-dot menus that have like stuff under them. So
hamburger menu. Yep.
Yeah, 3 dots. And then we've also got, and this is useful if you have a question like something fails and you don't know what it is, what you can do is you can download the debug info, and this actually consolidates the logs from both servers into a zip file that you can then send to us. Now, this is really important, going back to the links. This is a free product. We do not do free email tech support on this product. Really important. We just couldn't. This is running on over 2,600 servers right now. OttoFMS, we know as of last month, is running on 2,600 servers. It's a free product. We don't make any money for building this and sending it out. So we do not do free tech support via email. There is a community, and that's in one of the links. So if you've got this page up, you can find it here. But it's also just community.automatic.cloud. And this is where you can go and ask questions. And then one of us or some other community member will answer that. But we can handle this scale of thing. We can't handle email, because email, like if you send a question and it's been answered like 10 times, that's just not very effective. But in a community, we can point you at an earlier thread. We can do all this stuff. It's just way easier to manage as a community. So that's how we're doing it. You can send questions to the community, and we will answer them there.
Hot Air Balloon Kin says, thanks. We are going to be landing the airplane. Any final questions before we let Todd get back to his day job?
What do you guys think? Like, does this seem like it could be useful?
No, this is badass. It's badass.
Awesome. Yeah. Already useful. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of dev shops are using this, as you can imagine, and that's one of the reasons why we used to charge for this. We used to charge $400 for a 3-pack of servers. And, I think the most we ever got was like 300 servers installed, It's free now, 2,600 servers.
Yeah, that's what happened with our CRM, right? Same thing. When you make it free, it takes on a life of its own. So
it does. And, again, it's like, we believe that this kind of dev to production development lifecycle is the best way to develop high-risk solutions or high-value solutions. And so we want to make that it shouldn't be something that people have to pay extra for. They should just be able to do it. That's kind of our thing about everything we do in this ecosystem, is you should just be able to do this. It should just be part of what you can do with FileMaker. And you'll kind of see that theme repeated over and over again as we go through the week. You should just be able to do this. So that's what we do and make that available.
You should be able to do it. Operand says, just be careful if you have 300 gigs worth of files. Yeah, I don't have 300 gigs worth of
300 gigs. So that's an issue only if you're trying to move a copy, because again, if it's clones, the clones don't move. The date, if you got 300 gigs over here on your dev server, right? You probably don't have that on your dev server. You probably have a smaller set. But even if you do, the first thing that happens is it's going to create a clone of all these files. It's going to move the clone. And then the 300 gigabytes will take a while to migrate. But I still bet you'll do it this is going to depend a lot on the size of your FileMaker server now, because the more CPUs, the more RAM. Also, it can do multiple files in parallel. So you can actually have it migrating multiple files. But again, you're going to need a beefy server to do that, because it's going to suck up all the resources it can to do those data migrations.
Let me ask a question. So I have I have a personal FileMaker server that I use for my personal databases, because I eat my own dog food, and I use a Mac Mini M2 with
they're the best.
24 gigs of RAM. Right? People say, yes, Mac Mini, you can't use that for a server. Well, it's the best. It's the personal server. So the question is, if I put this on my 24 gig Mac Mini M2 server,
no problem. You'll have no problems.
But how much of the RAM is it going to chew on its own?
So you can actually, there's a lot of dials, and we can get more detailed into the dials when when we look at things in a little more, but I'll just point them out here. Not this. Not that. Go back. Sorry, I'm clicking the wrong button. I want advanced options. You have.
Down at the bottom, there's a RAM thing there. Yeah.
So you can say, how many files do you want to use? Do you want to run at a time? So let's say you have 5 files in your solution. It's going to use 2.5 gigabytes of RAM per file. This is set by the FileMaker data migration utility.
Yep.
It's just going to use it. Boom. So your FileMaker server is going to use up some memory, and then every file that's running at the same time is going to use 2.5 gigs. So you can you can adjust this. And then the other thing, we do that as well on the builds when we didn't configure any builds yet. We'll do that later. But we give you some dials you can tweak to help tune this stuff for different size servers. But just to say about the Mac Minis, I have right here under my desk, I have 2 M4 Macs mounted, M4 Mac Minis, and I've got 2 more in the garage connected straight to my router. These are great FileMaker servers. They're fantastic. The only issue is they're not server class hardware.
Yep.
So, disks can fail and things like that. But still, in terms of their speed, a 24 gigabyte Mac Mini, especially if it's an M4, will do just fine, unless you're really crushing a FileMaker server, kind of thing. They're great. I use them. Like I said, I have 4 Mac Minis in my home setup, and they're all M4s. And then I've got an M4 laptop, and then I've got an M4 Mac Air as well. M4 Air.
That's the little tiny server, the new form factor, the little tiny one.
It's this guy, right?
And
this guy comes in this little box.
Okay, and
these are great. These are great servers. We've been trying to figure out how we can host these in the cloud, but in terms of an on-prem server, pretty hard to beat. If you want to be on-prem, this is pretty hard to beat. I will cop to being an Apple fanboy. I do not admin Windows servers. So if you are comfortable with adminning Windows servers, then Windows is fine. Linux is the best one for the cloud.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
But in terms of on-prem, just for ease of use. And like the other thing is, this is the 24 gigabyte one. And this one I can order from the Apple Store, and it'll be here in 2 hours because it's the stock 24 gigabyte 512, server. They can deliver, if you're near an Apple Store, they can deliver it in 2 hours. So it's pretty great.
Wow.
Place it in 2 hours if something were to go down.
Yeah, I don't have the M4s yet. I still have the previous generation, but yeah,
they're still good. They're still good. They're very good little servers. Great for FileMaker. You can get a lot of RAM and get a lot of CPU.
Yes.
They will chug along really well.
Yeah, you don't cheap out on the RAM, everyone. By splurge on the RAM. That's the best thing you can do. All right, well, today is day 1 of 5 days. I can only tell you that given on what we've seen today, it's been an epic level of awesomeness. Todd, are we good to land the airplane at this point?
We're good to land the airplane. Yeah.
All right. So
people, if you want to go and try stuff out and come with questions tomorrow, what we're going to get into is some of these advanced options and some of the other deployment patterns that we're going to cover.
All right.
If you have questions, try stuff out, come tomorrow with questions, and we'll see what we can do.
So yeah, everyone, greatly appreciate it. Tomorrow we'll have more questions, awesomeness, and
yes,
once
we've
again,
got a couple floating around, but we can tackle tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Todd being here with us tomorrow. It will be awesome. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
in the night.